Welcome, everybody. I'm just making sure everybody that's here right now are able to get in before we start. Looks like it. Wonderful. So welcome to Sunday Live. We're so glad that you're all here and to help honor Ian's work and spend some time with him and learn about him. He's one of my favorite humans. I'll just go ahead and say that right out front. We always start the readings with a poem by somebody else. And tonight I chose Axe Handles by Gary Snyder. Axe Handles. One afternoon, the last week in April, showing Kai how to throw a hatchet. One half turn and it sticks in a stump. He recalls the hatchet head without a handle in the shop and goes to get it and wants it for his own. A broken off axe handle behind the door is long enough for a hatchet. We cut it to length and take it with the hatchet head and working hatchet to the wood block. There I begin to shape the old handle with the hatchet, and the phrase first learned from Ezra Pound rings in my ears. When making an axe handle, the pattern is not far off. I say this to Kai, look, we'll shape the handle by checking the handle of the axe we cut with. And he sees, and I hear it again. It's in Lu Ji's Wen Fu, 4th century AD, essay on literature, in the preface. In the making the handle of an axe, by cutting wood with an axe, the model is indeed near at hand. My teacher, Xing Chen, translated that and taught it years ago. And I see, Pound was an axe, Chen was an axe, I am an axe, and my son a handle, soon to be shaping again, model and tool, craft of culture, how we go on. That is Gary Snyder's Axe Handles from Axe Handles, copyright 1983. Tonight we have Ian Ramsey. Ian is a poet and educator based in Maine, where he directs the Kaufman Program for Environmental Writing and Wilderness Exploration. His writing has appeared in journals like Terrain.org, Off the Coast, High Desert Journal, Orion, Words and Images, and the Mountain Research Initiative. Ian, who holds an MFA from the Rainier Writing Workshop, has served as an artist in residence across North America and abroad, and he frequently collaborates with scientists internationally to communicate climate change research in creative ways. He's an ultra runner, sea kayak guide, and sponsored mountain athlete, and a founding board member of the nonprofit Physiology First, which gives students leading edge tools to manage anxiety and perform at a higher level. As a musician, he has been nominated for a Grammy and shared the stage with Yoko Ono and Tony Trisha, among others. He is currently finishing a poetry manuscript, Hackable Animal, I love that title, that will be published in 2022. Please welcome Ian Ramsey.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here. It's wonderful to see so many friends from all around the continent. I think there's like a 5,000 mile range of friends here that I see on the screen. So that's can't really beat that. I think we have a lot of time zones covered here. So
Yes.
Yeah, and like Alan, it's raining here as well in Maine. So I hear you. Well, thank you so much. Such a wonderful introduction. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much to Robert, to Juniper for Writing for Peace, for their great work, for everything they're doing. And thank you all for being here. As Juniper mentioned, I am working, I'm at the close to the finishing line. I'm like, if this is a 100-mile race, I'm at like mile 95 of this manuscript. So I've gone through the long, dark night. And at this point, I'm just like limping with a lot of adrenaline to the finish. So,
Well, thank you for showing up and you're limping.
I'm used to it. I'm used to it. So anyway, I'm going to be reading to you guys from this manuscript. It's titled Hackable Animal. The title comes from Yuval Noah Harari, who's an Israeli historian who's done a lot of really interesting work writing about both the history of the human race and also the future and the 21st century. And I find him to be an incredibly lucid thinker. And his ideas have certainly informed mine. And a lot of this manuscript is about sort of how to internally make sense of living in this rapidly changing world that we live in. And I've had the great fortune to travel a great deal throughout my adult life. It's really kind of been one of my biggest priorities. And as a result, a lot of these poems are kind of field notes from the world of globalization, from the world of technology, from the world of conservation and wilderness, from pop culture in some cases, from cultures colliding. And it seems appropriate that I should start with the title poem, Hackable Animal. I wasn't planning on that, but Juniper knows that I love Gary Snyder that she started with, and I'm sure we'll talk about it more, but Snyder's probably influenced me more than any other human being in the world, since I was 17 years old, which I bet we'll get into that story later. And so the poem Hackable Animal actually references a Gary Snyder poem, For All, which starts with him saying, to be alive, fording a stream, and he's backpacking in the Cascades. And so my poem actually takes place in the Cascades as well, but it takes a sort of postmodern 21st century twist to that as well. So Hackable Animal for Yuval Noah Harari. To be alive on a mid-August morn, fording a silty stream, barefoot, breath steaming, North Cascades, Kulshan's white massif at back, staring up hacked out granite at a radio-collared mountain goat staring down. A shaggy silence in the pitching vault of the sky, almost certainly flown here last year from Olympic National Park, a century after his ancestors were trapped and trucked from here to there. Brother Goat, I wonder at last year's airlift, as you and so many others swung blue blindfolded and sedated, orange harnessed in the open air, helicoptered across Puget Sound as we watched the King TV live stream, all to preserve wildness by moving wildness to less wild places to make them more wild places, which is to say, we're working pretty hard at the preservation of the world, preserving goats in parks along with silence, preserving wild places in parks and on screens, taking screens into wild places in place of silence, putting on collars and monitors and screens to track data and heart rate and attention and sleep to help me and the goat and the alpine ecosystem to upgrade our downgraded autonomies, each of us a wilderness, becoming a park.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
So that the sort of the origin of that, I guess I should have said beforehand, but in the early 20th century, they brought mountain goats from the North Cascades to the Olympic Mountains because they wanted to be able to hunt them. And then maybe 3 or 4 years ago, they decided to take them out of the Olympic Mountains and move them back to the North Cascades. So there was sort of this bizarre event where they were capturing these mountain goats, blindfolding them, hanging them from helicopters, flying them over Seattle and Puget Sound and dropping them off back in the Cascades to make things more wild. So it was I think that was really interesting. So yeah.
It is absolutely interesting. So I have a question for you about that. We'll get to the book from your youth in a bit, but the one that came to mind right now is I know that you've been very intentional about the kind of house you have and what you do on your land and what you eat and you move through the world and the Kaufman Center and all these different aspects. When did this become part of your values? Did you have a role model for that? Was it something that came from within and you challenged some of the people that were in your life at the time? When did it kind of start?
Yeah, sure. So I was really fortunate. So to take you back, I come from a family of eccentrics, of which I proudly follow in their footsteps. I had a French grandfather who was taking his college finals at the Sorbonne as Hitler was marching into Paris. I had another grandfather who actually just passed away like a month ago, who was a biology professor and musician and writer and runner, and I'm quite a bit like him. And he was also a Quaker, and so my parents grew up in Southern Ohio, and fortunately for me, nothing against Southern Ohio, but they grew up in sort of the greater Cincinnati area, and in the late 1960s when Kent State was happening and race riots and a lot of they actually grew up in the town where the Freedom Riders buses would leave from to go down south. So they were exposed to a lot, and they moved to Maine. They moved to Maine in 1970. They bought a house and 40 acres for $14,000. My mom is still in that house today. And so I was fortunate, and there was kind of a movement at that point in the 1970s. There was kind of a back to the land movement. There was a couple in Maine, Helen and Scott Nearing, who were sort of back to the land gurus, and also social activists. And so anyway, I grew up kind of in that world. I grew up in this sort of world of, advocating for peace. I grew up going to Quaker meeting, a lot of peace activism, a lot of environmental activism, a lot of books, raising our own food in many cases. And so I definitely was introduced to a lot of those ideas pretty early on. I would say that it was a sort of a bizarre existence, because I was in this area, Skowhegan, Maine, where there were like there had been all these communes, and all my friends growing up, for instance, were all like, their parents were all Jewish artists from like Brooklyn, living in the middle of nowhere in Maine. That was all my friends. I can't remember not going to see like French cinema, because there was like an amazing, independent movie theater that's still there today. And Allen Ginsberg used to come read at like a local art school. So I grew up with that, but at the same time, I was going to school in this logging town in rural Maine with pulp trucks and snowmobiles and people pushing each other through plate glass windows and, hunting. And so it was sort of it took me a while to make sense of that, I guess. But when I was 17 years old, I was in the Skowhegan area high school library, and just kind of going through the shelves, this was my habit, and I found a copy of The Dharma Bums by Jack Kerouac, and which was a portrayal of himself and, unbeknownst to me at the time, Gary Snyder, in their 20s, climbing mountains, meditating, having adventures. And I sort of said, oh, this is interesting. I like this. And so that kind of set me off on a path. And throughout college, that was sort of the entry point. I got pretty obsessed. Snyder was sort of my entry point into a lot of things, whether it was Buddhism, and coming from a Quaker background, like meditation was not a big stretch. It was, and I essentially, anything that Gary Snyder wrote about, I studied, and anybody he mentioned, I looked up. And so a good solid 5 years of that. And that brings you to Alan Watts, that brings you to indigenous thought, that brings you to deep ecology, that brings you into the history of Southeast Asian Buddhism. It brings you to a lot of things. And so that really, and a lot of the people that he wrote about and that were friends of his ended up becoming friends of mine. And I ended up meeting Snyder. I wouldn't say I'm friends with him, but I've spent some time with him. And he led me to people like Richard Nelson in Alaska, to Sam Hamill in the Pacific Northwest, people like that. And I'd say that was really what kind of set me on the path. Yeah.
So, wonderful. So during that time, I can kind of weave this in now, and then we'll hear something else. But what book would it be? The Dharma Bums book, or is there a different book that's? I would say the Dharma Bums was a pretty key book. Yeah, I'd say that was probably the book that kind of set me on the path, so to speak. Okay. That sounds great.
Yeah.
So let's hear something else, please.
All right. Excellent. So since, let's see here, where should we go? Okay. So as we move on, I'm going to go to, this is a poem sort of from Alaska. This is called Ugianoktuk, which is an Inuit word. And it means to behave strangely. And when I was in college, I went to school for a while at the University of Alaska at Fairbanks. And I spent a lot of time studying with Native people, including a really extraordinary woman named Catherine Atla, who was a Athabascan elder. And I had a lot of, I literally had friends who could see Russia from their houses, unlike Sarah Palin. I had a friend who lived on St. Lawrence Island, and on a clear day, he could see Siberia across the water where his cousins lived, because they were also Inuit. So I was in an Inuit dance troupe, which is a pretty exotic experience for a kid from Skowhegan, Maine. Anyway, so I've had this sort of long engagement with the North and the Arctic. So this poem is called Ugianoktuk. And so the polar bear became a Patagonia campaign, a Sierra Club calendar photo, a YouTube video to which so many clicked the sad emoji, a victory for branding, but not ultimately for the bear, the endless drift of extinction. Can you imagine your world literally melting away? My Inuit friends in Alaska had a word, Ugiangatuk, to behave strangely, of the weather, how the dispersing cloud foretells a storm that comes in minutes instead of a day, the way spring is born again and again with melting, thawing, melting, thawing. The polar bear and I are born again as globalized citizens. The great white gods refugee their way south as the brown and black people head north and the white people argue over what to do. Once a god of the mysterious barren north, you're now a disoriented beggar seeing trees for the first time. Cruise ships, Exxon waits in the wings. Who could care to wander a highway in Newfoundland far from your beloved ice? I'm thinking about booking a luxury cruise through the Northwest Passage to see it all before it's gone. I hope to see a polar bear, but not too close. I will continue on with, this is Arinyani, and this is sort of another way of approaching sort of the disrupting world we lived in. So Arinyani is a Hindu forest deity, and this takes place in San Francisco a couple of years ago. And you can imagine the sort of techie, expensive, fancy tech bro world of San Francisco here. Arinyani. Our purple-haired waitress has a forearm tattoo of Arinyani, the Hindu forest deity. And we're talking migration corridors, desert tortoises, and rewilding over Onokoroshi and Tunatataki. While next to us, a group of programmers are talking AI, betting on how long before the bots take over. I'm 8 years old again in central Maine's forests, contemplating yet another moose, while coveting the $29.99 Radio Shack robot in the Sunday Flyer. The code ninjas are hoodies and opportunity, while the tree huggers are Marin Cool and well-stocked wine cellars. We joke over reintroduced grizzlies roughing up Shasta crystal shops, and they dude chortle about a VC YouTube video that went viral. And here's another joke that really happened in 1893. Muir, Tesla, and Kipling walk into a bar, a dinner party actually. Tesla explaining how he'll hydroelectrify Niagara Falls. John Muir sniffs disdainfully at this incursion into the wild, and Kipling makes a joke about how the future has Muir over a barrel going down the falls. And here we are a century later, still kegging down Niagara's gush. Maybe the AIs will move us into a post-carbon utopia, or maybe they'll pass over humans in favor of a functioning Gulf Stream and swallow migrations. Or maybe carbon levels hockey stick and the barrel crashes in a symphony of refugees and starvation. As the techies update their Instagrams and the conservationists drive their Teslas back across the bay to Sausalito, I wonder, has Arignani lived through these dimensions before? Or is this some new velocity? And what are we hurtling towards?
A lot of recognition from the audience, the gallery here. So yes.
Mm-hmm. So one of the themes, and some to some extent I can trace this back to Gary Snyder as well, is there's also a theme throughout this manuscript and throughout my writing and my influences, partially as a Buddhist, partially as someone who's traveled quite a bit in Asia, partially as just a poet who loves good poetry. I have made a lifelong study of Dharma, but also of Chinese and Japanese poets, in particular haiku, and also the Chinese mountain poets, a lot of the Tang Dynasty poets. And Reed Silvers, who's in the audience, has had to bear with me teaching him some of that stuff in class, actually. And so this poem is called The Narrow Road to the Interior, which is the title of Basho's, one of Basho's travel journals. And Basho would take these long walking journeys. And if you don't know Basho, you probably, I'm guessing a lot of people here do, but Basho invented the haiku as we know it, and really kind of is a big deal. So this is called The Narrow Road to the Interior. I wanted to hush the grief, so I picked up Basho. But the radio still chattered about the marathon bombings. I wanted to hush the grief, so I picked up Basho again. But the Watershed newsletter was lying there shouting to call my senator about the proposed dam. I made a fire using the newsletter and fell asleep. When I woke, I still wanted Basho. I looked out the window at the dense forest, thinking of the wolf that a biologist friend had seen up near the Quebec border, the supposedly extinct mountain lions that a dozen friends had seen over the years. I wanted to read about the famous pine at Takekuma. Finally, picking up my thumbed over copy of Basho, I opened to his quote, "Everywhere between pines' graves, bringing home the fact that even vows of, quote, wing and wing, branch and branch, forever merging, unquote, must also come to such, sadness increasing. I stepped outside the night's blue edge, a fisher screaming, two owls hooting, sweet reek of maple bud and pine sap, lynx and chipping sparrows moved north across the eastern forest."
You're fabulous. So you acknowledging that one of your students was here, lucky student to have you as an instructor and an advocate and learning alongside them, I'm sure. But I'm wondering, one of the questions I thought about is if one thing that you hope your students take from you. You offer many, many different things with your music, with your mindset, mindfulness, with your arts background, writing. There's so many, and your trips. So what's one thing, if you could sum it up as one thing that you hope that they take away from you?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is I want them to have a sense of personal agency in the world. I want them to have a sense that they have personal power to advance their own curiosities and passions. And also I think as part of that, that they are willing to step into what is called of them in the 21st century. Because we are at a big inflection point, and they are going to have big things to do. And so, again, that's part of the personal agency. I want them to feel like they're ready to step into that. And I think it's a terrifying time to be alive, but I also think it's a really exciting time to be alive. And I'm really excited to see what Reed and my other students do over the next years. So, yeah.
It's really fun. Since I've known you, you would mention probably each trip that you were excited to hear from some students and to see what they were doing and that they were coming back. And actually, I think one time when you came out, you were getting ready to meet up with somebody, or that you had just met up with them, and it's wonderful to see that.
Yeah, a lot of my best friends are former students. I teach with several former students. So yeah, think so the school that I teach at, I just have and partially also the topics that I teach, I have and leading trips, it's not like I'm teaching them usually for a class or a year. Often I'm seeing, these poor, I think these poor kids, to be honest, but it's not unusual for them to have me day in and day out for years on end. And then if you do something like, Reed and I went to Alaska together, way into the depths of Glacier Bay, Alaska. We took a bush plane across the mountains, so those are experiences that really forge you and bring you together as well. So yeah.
Yes. Thank you for the lovely answer, generous answer.
Yeah, of course. So this poem is called Paramo. So Paramo is a high altitude grassland in the Andes. So my partner, Heidi Asbjornsen, is a scientist. She's an ecology professor at University of New Hampshire, and she does a lot of research around forestry and climate change and ecohydrology. So looking at how watersheds move and then looking at how they're going to be impacted by climate change. So that includes things like drought experiments, where they will cover an entire acre of forest with plastic sheeting to mimic drought. Or in a cloud forest, they'll put up a 4-story curtain on a mountainside to keep the fog away, to see if it will change how things work. And a lot of these are in equatorial climates, which are changing quite quickly. So I spend a lot of time with scientists and with her and other scientists, and I've kind of created this interesting niche where my gig is to communicate science to non-scientists, because oftentimes the scientists are great at their research, but they've been trained and incentivized to only do the research. And when it comes to transmitting that in meaningful ways to other people, that's not always their skill set. So I've spent a lot of time doing that. So this poem takes place in Ecuador, in the Paramo. So this is a research site we were at. So the Paramo is this high altitude grassland, and it functions as a glacier. So it rains, it stores the water, and then it slowly releases it. And so something like 40% of the cities in the Andes get their water from Paramos. And they're really high, 13,000 feet. So really intense ultraviolet light, very intense conditions. And no one really knows how they're going to respond to changing climate. And so that we spent some time up there doing that. So this is called Paramo, and it's about this research site that we were at in the high Andes. And the site was actually where a mine was going to be created afterwards. They were just kind of setting up the infrastructure. They were spending 10 years setting up the infrastructure for this mine before they dug a single thing. So the scale was enormous. I think it's probably like a mine the size of the city of Tacoma or something, So this is called Paramo. The katabatic wind screams down from the glaciers on Chimborazo, Cotopaxi, and Cayambe. Ice that will be gone in a decade. The sky sleets, blazes, rainbows, and hails, all in a windy hour under the ozoneless glare. The Quechua miners in the camp with sun-blasted faces drink beer. I am with them, watching The Matrix in Spanish. I am trying to imagine what a high-altitude villager without running water thinks of Neo's virtual reality conundrum. But then the fight scenes are really good. At dinner, I try to ask a miner about football, but Spanish is a second language for both of us. He worries about his 5 children, while I worry about writing the perfect poem. When I wake up in the middle of the night and stagger out to pee at 13,000 feet, the Southern Cross is ringing with clarity, and so is my confusion. My sea-level lungs gasp for air. Last week, 5,000 feet down in the city, I watched a group of women dance a routine to Beyonce's All the Pretty Ladies. Their Nikes and American Eagle shirts, bright songbirds of color against the pale adobe of a 500-year-old Spanish church. On my iPhone, news of Trump's solar tariffs dinged and the glacier shrugged. The older indigenous ladies walked by carrying bundles of sticks on their backs. Once again, I feel far from home. Once again, my Facebook status doesn't know who I am, despite what I tell the world. On the bus to Vilcabamba, I will tell the driver to stop, and I will get off and walk into the mountains, which are aloof to my suffering. Nevertheless, I am still breathing, and a million grasses dance in the Andean wind. They are the souls of all the people and animals who have lived there. Their lives are a bottomless well into which I lower myself, trying to drink, not to drown.
A lovely poem. Are you two scheduled to go back there again anytime soon?
Nothing immediate. I mean, right now with COVID, you know, that kind of, Heidi does have a student program that was supposed to run this spring, but that won't be running till the following year. And so we'll see what's possible. But it's really interesting to see. I love having an opportunity to travel to these places and see how climate and globalization and culture are all kind of being impacted, and then also to find out see the solutions that people are coming up with.
Yes.
Yeah. So, all right, let's go to, yeah, this will be good. All right. This one is a little lighter, a little more sarcastic, but it gets at some of the same things. So this is called Greenland. And as some of you may recall, our former president a couple of years ago wanted to buy Greenland, not really realizing that he couldn't. And so there's a guy named James Altucher, who's sort of an internet creative, who actually was like, I'm going to find out what it would take to actually buy Greenland. And he actually wrote a whole article about what would actually be involved in buying Greenland. So this is called Greenland for James Altucher. I've decided to buy Greenland. It's lonely, cold, and melting. A problem to be solved. Just look at a map and you'll see an island the size of Saudi Arabia with a population the size of Dubuque, Iowa. Its ice caps are melting and making weather unstable for the rest of us. Passed by in the global economy, it has a GDP lower than Lesotho. It is simply silence in the great white north. A hunk of unused rock where a handful of Danish semi-citizens huddle under the endless Arctic night like anchorites, eating salted fish and watching Scandinavian crime dramas. So I can buy with an easy mind. But who even does that? Maybe I can hire an exponential life coach or start a hashtag Buy Greenland social media movement or partner with a Chinese startup to take it over for ski resort rights, except that a few Tibetans and Taiwanese have warned me how those kind of deals tend to turn out. Nevertheless, Greenland deserves a better future. We'll 3D print carbon negative cities with vertical gardens that grow 500-pound cabbages in the 24-hour summer, so much closer to utopia than the perennially dysfunctional Costa Rican eco-villages. We all must wake up each morning, so why not do it creatively? Should I hire Inuits to guide eco-tourists on Aurora Borealis dog sled tours? Could we corner the market as the last place to see a wild polar bear? Wouldn't the robotized mining operations be elegant and free of human rights problems? Isn't this a logical precedent to life on Mars? No. We come from the earth and we must keep our feet planted within the relentless gravity of our lives. Perhaps I'll Kickstarter this enterprise, offering up tax havens and vacation home plots to survivalists and billionaires. Would AIs be interested in the first nation with robot citizenship? The massive island shrugs off more ice and settles into its tectonic plates. A frontier under a frontier. It's a narwhal in a goldfish world. The 10,000-pound Mercator distorted gorilla on the top of this spinning planet. Its glaciers penetrate the imagination. Canada and Russia are too busy fighting over Arctic shipping lanes to bother. How to proceed? On Monday morning, I'll reach out to Queen Margaret II of Denmark. I will talk of the spirit of her Viking ancestors and offer her rare earth mineral rights, the first refusal rights to the Netflix series about Knud Rasmussen, a seasteading compound outside of Nugasatuk. In its own dowdy and cold northern way, the island mumbles, develop me, develop me.
Fabulous.
So one of the things, as I mentioned Gary Snyder as a big influence. Another, and I'll say that I essentially spent most of my 20s and early 30s meeting my heroes and often befriending them. So that was everybody from, they tended to be sort of these older male, sort of environmentally oriented poets and writers. Anyway, it tended to be people like Gary Snyder. There's a poet named John Haynes from Alaska. So John Haynes was somebody I got to know, David Budbill in Vermont. There's a whole series of these kind of older men, a bunch in the Pacific Northwest, Tom Jay, who passed away recently, Richard Nelson in Alaska. One that I didn't ever get to meet, I was always like one step away. Like I hung out with everybody he knew, including his wife, but I never got to meet him, was Hayden Carruth. And Hayden, I could tell you a gazillion Hayden stories from everybody, all my friends who knew him, but I never got to know him. But this poem is called To Hayden Carruth. And if you don't know about Hayden Carruth, Hayden was the editor of Poetry magazine before the age of 30. And then he kind of went crazy. He was at the top of the poetry world. And then he kind of went a little crazy, and he ended up moving to rural Vermont and living there for like 30, 40 years and writing in a cowshed. And he wrote these extraordinary poems. And later on, he taught at Syracuse. And he ended up, I think, winning the Pulitzer Prize like when he was like close to 80, I think. But he's one of the greatest poets of the 20th century. And I'm not nearly well known enough, but this is called To Hayden Carruth. The Costa Rican luxury suite had a view of the Pacific, but lacked rusting tools. Even in Anglesey, surrounded by Neolithic ruins, the cottage plates were stacked too neatly. As our plane raced to Seoul to avoid Fukushima's poisons, I dreamed of black flies and fishers screaming in the night. This is why I hide in the woods and listen to the earth. Isn't that why you spent all those years in that Vermont cowshed, reeking of pipe smoke, bar oil, and hay? When I can understand the animals, I will no longer need people. Then I will write the earth's greatest poem. It will be read by coyotes and goldfinches in a logged over clearing at sunrise on the longest day of the year. Last night, I drank 2 bottles of red wine and looked at photos of the Alberta tar sands, a watershed larger than Vermont. In deer season, the woods shake with guns. The cows shudder, and just as you did, I bide my time.
It's wonderful. Wonderful poem. I'm not sure if I told you or not, Ian, but in moving Sam's books and distributing some of the books, he had one of Hayden's journals. It was a handwritten journal, the oversized. It was fine print, neat. It was just amazing to have it in hand for a bit there. Aaron has it. So.
Oh, good. Yeah, those guys wrote letters weekly to each other for years, and that I would give anything to read those letters. I imagine they're quite brilliant and quite salty.
Salty is a good word, yes.
Yeah. So one of the things I'm really passionate about is wild places and public lands. And so a lot of my work deals with going to parks, to wilderness areas. And one of the themes that we see as climate becomes a greater and greater issue is fire. So the next 2 poems that I'm going to read kind of touch on fire, one very specifically and one a little less, and also our relationship to other animals. So this is called Smokey, as in Smokey the Bear. Smokey. The bear coughs the bristlecone smoke like the rest of us, but isn't allowed into the visitor center for AC and free Kool-Aid. No one said it was easy being an icon, a t-shirt, an ad campaign. And what can I learn from the bear? He wears a GPS ear tag and I an iPhone. I sat alone for 2 days in smoky Yosemite, an abandoned husband with a burning heart. Half Dome, less Ansel Adams gelatin print wilderness and more Beijing smog. Across the Sierras, the smoky signs felt useless, endless helicopters dropping dispersant. The bear and I see extinction out of the corner of our eyes. In the annual fires roaring across the West was extinction, and Zinkies selling off public land was extinction. The last grizzly in the Sierras was extinction. The cougar crossing the highway, a protest of extinction. The story ends with the real Smokey sleeping out his days in DC's National Zoo, dreaming of sagebrush while retirees eat wieners and point. A boy grows up, his head dreaming on a teddy bear. Without realizing it, his life is a shrine to bears. Bears in Alaska, bears in Hokkaido, bears in the Andes, bears in Quebec. Bears that don't promise self-actualization or a good 401k or freedom from cancer. Bears that knock around the soul without permission. Bears that ruin a marriage. The boy becomes a man who wants to love women, but they will never smell like bears. People are people, but bears are a secret howling ladder to a world of smoky caves. Even as I try not to think about bears, Smokey ambles away slowly, his fur wet with my dreams. I have no right to bring him back to life.
What a fabulous poem, Ian. Fabulous poem. There are a couple of comments I don't want you to miss. There were some other ones also, but Michael Sims says that the Hayden Carruth poem is wonderful. And Kim and Melanie Peacocks, we must keep our feet planted in the relentless gravity of our lives. Good stuff, Ian. Powerful observations, well delivered. Thank you for questioning it all, for your nice balance of respect and resistance. And I love that, the balance of respect and resistance. So I think that
well, Kim and Melanie have been longtime mentors of mine. They're some of those people. And when I take students to Alaska, we read Kim's books, and Kim and Melanie welcome us into their houses, and they are just as or more amazing than Glacier Bay itself. So it's a privilege to have them here. This is called Fire. Ojai's on fire, and the San Juans are on fire, and the Southern Amazon's on fire, just like Myanmar. All visible on a world map with little flame emojis on my phone. An effort by a well-meaning NGO to gamify the burning of our world. Gamify. A strange response to 1,000-year-old villages vaporizing, the screams of mothers digitized, beamed to satellites and cell towers, and thoughtful Starbucksing thumbs noticing between Instagram posts, holding the burning world in their hands, gaining points for paying attention. But threatening and cajoling and celebrating and guilting are weaker than swiping, always swiping. Swipe and burn and swipe and melt and swipe and terrorize and swipe and huddle in boats in the Aegean and swipe for the dopamine drip. In Portland, it was 110 degrees, the Cascades burning. I saw a photo of Gifford Pinchot and wondered what he would think. Forest Service planes floated through the smoke like ghosts of fire seasons past. On CNN, everything was burning, a cartoon of disaster. The friar, persistent and lonely, keeps to itself and says, here's a tree that is burning, and here's a house that is burning, and even though water is nearby, yes, this dog is also burning, and when will you wake up and start calling me by your name? All right, well, I'll read one that touches kind of on, how are we doing on time?
we have time, and it's okay if we go a bit over because we go into the after party. So if it's a longer poem,
Okay.
we have the announcement and of course the thank you for being here. I think that we've covered many things without me asking the questions. So
Right.
which is lovely. Would you my friend?
All right, so I'll read two more that kind of touch on the past year that we've all been through together here. Obviously, I think that 2020 was a remarkable inflection point in the larger culture, and something of a major pattern interrupt. And my hope is that we can learn from it in generative ways and move things forward in a really positive way. We'll see. I think we live at a moment when everything is on the table for good and for bad. But I'm also, I heard someone say they were sub-optimistic. I thought that was about right. I wouldn't say I'm optimistic, but I wouldn't say I'm not optimistic. So I'll say I'm sub-optimistic.
I wish there wasn't a need for that word, but I completely concur.
Yeah. So the first poem I'll read is called Pandemic. And it starts with a quote from Chen Ko, who was a Zen master who lived in the 16th century. And I think this poem speaks to the fact that as technology advances, it's incumbent upon us, as technology gets to know us better and better and control us, that one of our main tasks is to know ourselves better than the algorithms do. And this is one of the things, the nonprofit that I'm involved in, that's one of our big things, is you need to know yourself. We try to articulate to kids a lot. You need to know yourself better than the algorithms do. Because if you don't know yourself better, they will control you. And you could say the same thing about media. You could say the same thing about advertising. You could say all those things. So this is called Pandemic. So it starts with this quote from Chen Ko in 1595. In the distance, form includes the great void, heaven and earth, mountains and rivers and forests. Nearby, it includes this body of flesh and blood that appears before us. We are told to mask, even as our leaders refuse. The screaming protesters think their AR-15s will protect them from the virus, a medieval supposition. But then again, Hui Nang wrote the Platform Sutra in the 7th century, a wisdom we have yet to catch back up to. Closing is opening, and opening is closing, is double speak, is a koan, is the reason I am deep in the Maine woods where there are no people, even if every year there are more ticks that will dismantle your body down to rotting studs. I am scratched and lost and happy in the one place where frictionless e-commerce isn't mining my subconscious, even as I slap at clouds of black flies unfastening dark riverbeds of blood. Bugs. In the jungle outside Iquitos, I sweltered, mud-footed and bitten, groggy with the density of life, wrist sore from quarrying trees to measure drought from tree rings. Scientists and I walked in grants and isotopes while the riboneros slashed hectares and smoked, tinkering at coughing engines. In nearby Belen, the floating market was a lathering stink of alligator heads, hacked up snakes, monkeys sweating on tables. Under the thick-aired sun, fresh from the jungle ayahuasca nuts, stepped past hog-sized fish sulking in tubs to dally over jaguar claw necklaces before flying home to Stuttgart and St. Louis, misted with the same yawning microbes that oil and rubber-filled container ships chug down the muddy Amazon toward Manaus. Somewhere, 1,000 immigrants wade deep inside my bloodstream with half-feral adaptation, carrying the jungle inside me, hacked and burned and planted. They ask me what I will do with the rest of my life, and I do not know. I must find my original face before the algorithms assign it to me.
So wonderful. I love how your poems weave history and present and past, what I want to say, I'm not going to be able to come up with the right word. Cultures, customs, not just the history of it, but the specifics, not necessarily to that poem, but there's so much weaving in your writing. And it's such, I understand better now, even though I feel like I knew you pretty well, about how your upbringing and your curiosity really started you on this path of gathering all of this that's showing up in your work. And it's this depth that shows up on the page that's mesmerizing. I can't wait to hold this book in my hands and to be able to look at it and spend time with it. So
well, thank you. Yeah. All right, so I will, I'll finish with hacked animal. So I started with hackable animal, so I'll finish with hacked animal. So as cytokine backed us into the future, I locked down, lax as a blanket and stymied, left to putter and veer. Each screen-worn day slumped into the same nowhere, all droplets and superstition, boredom and bleeding, while the dusty Brahmin, bankrupt with legacy, imped and hoarded their last stand, pretending that the sea of anxiety wasn't deeper and stormier. But my cave glands knew that the digital intimacies were a falsous bomb, a glitchy lifeboat in reality's shattered prism. Pulped up and sulky, I crutched yet deeper into data's snazzy marinade, doing my best to skirt the strafing ultimatums, the fraying weather and puckering agencies, the mercantile mudslide, even as consequences called in oversold IOUs. I'd been backed into a corner, or at least an Ulaanbaatar cloud server, but transcending my shoe purchase history and sleep data would require going beyond the screen's frictionless oblivion. Would I birth a scarred up resurrection? Straining against a dwindling attention span, I ached heavy as a hungry ghost, trying to rummage new credos. Redeem the unredeemable? Maybe not. But even as the wounds swelled, I had to figure out a way through.
wonderful. Some pretty intense images there. Those were great. Yes.
Yeah, it's a pretty intense year.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. What I'd like to do is a couple of things. One is thank you. Thank you for spending time with us and collaborating with us. These videos will end up on our Writing for Peace website. And we're an educating organization, so your thoughts and ideas about writing and your relationship with students and what you take forward, I just thank you for those generous answers so we can pay it forward to other students through the video, students and teachers. But to thank you, and then we'll have the announcement from Robert, and then I will open it up so everybody can say hello if you want to or ask questions. So please stick around for just a moment. So first, just thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for coming.
Yeah, it's wonderful hearing about Hackable Animal or from Hackable Animal. I'm going to unmute Robert and he's going to tell us about submissions.
Writing for Peace does an anthology twice a year, and our guest editor this year is Adriana Paramo. Her theme is Letters from the Self to the World. I'm announcing it because I'm the editor-in-chief. I'm going to send some links here and some more information in just a moment. And Ian, I definitely admire your work, and I would be flattered if you would submit something.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
It's honest, heartfelt, and environmentally sound.
Thank you, Robert.
Very much.
I'm going to switch it back over. And now you all have the ability to unmute yourself and say hello. Hopefully show your face if you're so inclined.
Hi, Ian.
Hey, everybody. So good to see everybody.
Yeah, I'm so glad I attended, right? I mean, I know we're just like yards from each other most of the time, but I don't get to hear your poetry, and it was marvelous. It was just marvelous. I have been a big Gary Snyder fan in the past, so I mean, I still am. It's just that I don't read him every day anymore. But never mind. I just loved your work. It was great to hear you.
Thank you so much.
I also want to buy your book. So
wonderful. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Anybody else want to say hello? Let's scroll through here.
I have to log off soon, but I just wanted to say thank you. I wrote this in my comments, but it was so powerful just hearing you read, and I love all of the images and thoughts and meaning that you intertwine in such powerful work. It was intelligent, it was full of soul, and I can't wait to hold your book in my hand someday soon. So wonderful. Thanks, Ian.
Well, thank you. That's high praise from a great poet. So
I'm sorry that I have to log off, but it
thank you
was
so much.
wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thanks for
Thank
coming.
you.
Lisa.
Yeah, thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Anybody else want to say hello?
Hello, Ian.
Stan.
I love you, man. You're just amazing. Those were great poems in all the right ways. You are a wonderful conveyor of that spirit of all of those masters, a few of whom I was lucky enough to meet. And it is so real and contemporary. It's not any echo or imitation. It's the inner spirit of their work you are embodying. I'm so happy to know you are a teacher, as I've known for a long time, but of all your amazing qualities, my sliver of optimism, as I will frequently say, resides in the future and in the kids. I'm a total self-taught pessimist about contemporary politics from the age of 5, but my optimism is the future, and you help make that real for sure. People like you teaching. How you do everything you do, I don't know. Do you have a trick? Do you have a special food? How do you get the energy to do all this stuff you do?
My engine runs pretty hot, but yeah.
When you're running one, let's say you're doing an Ironman type race or some sort of strenuous effort, what kind of zone are you in? Are you thinking of a poem? Are you?
Oh yeah, I mean, I will tell you, if you are running through wilderness in the night, all night, you get to some really interesting places in your, I view like endurance, backcountry endurance running, ultra marathons, as it's essentially, it's very similar when I used to do 10-day silent meditation retreats or sessions at Zen centers. It's the same thing. It's just you're moving through wilderness and, you might run into a bear. But other than that, like it's this amazing state, and and I won't geek out on you right now about all the research around flow states and creativity, but that's a big engine of all this, and it puts you in contact. It takes you out of that like prefrontal lobe critical, self-critical voice and puts you in like a much deeper, ancient, more powerful place. So yeah, and for those of you who don't know, Stan was a big part of my past. Stan was the founder of the MFA program that I went through, and an inspiring, beautiful person. So, and a great poet.
Stan is going to be our next
that book. Congratulations on everything.
Well, thank you. I hope I see you this summer when I'm out in your neck of the woods.
I want to see you. You make me wish, not for the first time you get to I wish I'd led a different life. But really, you have the life you led. That's for another universe.
That's right. I'll also mention that if you go on YouTube, there's a video of Stan interviewing Gary Snyder in 1974, I think it is.
Lord. Yeah.
I found this video of Gary Snyder. I was like, wait, is that Stan interviewing? Yeah. So
wonderful. I'll have to check that out.
I'll tell you, man, in that interview, this is a little personal anecdote, but there was a knock on my office door 20 years later or more. And there was a young undergraduate woman there looking at me with eyes wide. And she said, did you interview Gary Snyder? I said, yeah. She said, that was you on that interview? I said, yeah. And then she looked amazed and said, you were a fox and ran away. I love the past tense there. I looked at that. The guy was a young, interesting looking guy on that thing. Who the hell was that? Yeah, so.
That's a great story, Stan.
I love that kind of story.
Yes. Yes. Anybody else want to say hello?
Oh yeah, hi, Mr. Ramsey. How you doing? That was
good.
Good. Yeah, no, I just want to say, yeah, excellent poems. Really cool. Is definitely some great visualizations, And I just want to say, yeah, I feel real inspired. You know, I like what you were saying, like what you hope to get into your students. I think I definitely feel that, like how, you know, we have our personal agency to do what we want in the world. And I think something like this is just what I needed to kind of, you know, it feels like you get in like a online class funk, and it's just like Zoom every day. And so I don't know, it's kind of, you know, change it up, something different for this evening to give me some listen to some poetry and feel inspired. So yeah, it's definitely really awesome.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Reed. Reed, just so that you guys know, Reed's a student at Plymouth State University in New Hampshire and has been doing a ton of writing, which has been getting out into the world, which has been really great. And he's also been skiing and hiking and doing a lot of wonderful things. And he spent way more time with me than any human being should have to. So for better or for worse. So anyway, it's such a pleasure to see you, Reed, and I look forward to seeing you in person when the world permits it in these strange times.
Yeah,
thank you. Yeah, thanks a lot, man.
Thanks.
Really proud of you.
Thanks for joining us, Reed. It's nice to meet you and see you here.
Oh, yeah, good to see you. Nice to meet you.
And for braving yourself and talking. Many people don't talk, so great job first time showing up. Yes. Anybody else want to say hello before we close it out? Maybe not. We're down to just a few. Well, I just want to say thanks again, Ian. It's so wonderful to see you. Just hearing your voice is fabulous. Yeah.
Thank you for creating this. I mean, this beautiful form, and this is one of the blessings of the past year, is to have things like this where I can be sitting here looking at Kim and Melanie in Gustavus, Alaska, Reed in New Hampshire. We got Florida, we have Port Townsend, we have Maine, right? We have people all over the place, and we're all here together, and that's a really beautiful thing. And again, those are the kind of the things that I don't think the coming years will be easy, but I'm looking forward to seeing how human resilience and creativity manifests itself. I think that's a really exciting thing, and I think this is a good example of that.
Yes, it's definitely been a panacea for me over the past several months to be able to connect and spend time with lovely people and hear their words. So thank you everybody for showing up and spending time with us. Next week, I tried to interject it there tactfully. It kind of didn't come out completely clear. On April 11th, Stan Sandbell Rubin is going to be our reader. So Stan, that was just on the screen talking. He's a fabulous poet, and I'm really looking forward to hearing him. On April 25th, it will be Angela Narcisco Torres will be with us. So those are our next two readers. We're gradually shifting over to every 2 weeks, but there'll be a hiccup because we're doing a tribute reading for Sam Hamill. So that throws off the reading rotation just a little bit. So you have to kind of watch to see the dates and the announcements, because it won't quite be every other week. Because I'm not going to do one on Mother's Day weekend. I'm opting out of that one just in case I get to see or spend time with my kids. I don't want to have to make sure I'm in Wi-Fi range that day. So watch the dates. We have some fabulous writers coming up, and thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you all so much. Yeah, it's really beautiful. Yeah.
Thank you.
See many of you soon. Yeah.
Yes. Let's see. Alan, you're going to say hello before you leave? No? Maybe not. Well, we'll just sit here and talk about you, Braden. At least say hello. What, do you have Teddy online instead? You have the dog online instead of being online? Be nice to say hello. Yes. And your dog, Ian. Wonderful. I saw it. Yeah. How's the dog? The dog training?
He is great. He's great. He's super cute. He's wonderful. He's sweet. He's a rescue, so we got some fear stuff that we need to work on, but we're working on that. And yeah, he's lovely. He's lovely. So
really exciting.
Yeah. No, I'm pretty excited about it. Yeah.
You're wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you. That it's not that you'll probably want to go and watch yourself, but you could repost repost it. It
Okay.
usually takes. I'm not sure. Craig, Carmel's husband, has been processing them, and I think it takes at least a few days. But I know that they've been traveling and having family things go on. But it will be on
Okay.
Friday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's all a gift, so it's all like whatever manifests is great. So this is like a lovely, and it's a lovely format and lovely organization. And as I mentioned, like I think it's such a example of the great things that are happening from the past year.
Yes.
So yeah.
For me, it's lovely. I had a few connections with Carmel before Sam died, but that's how I am connected with Carmel. Is we met before when he was sick, and then of course at the memorials. So it's been wonderful to get connected in a deeper way. I think Tara wants to say hello. Come on up.
Oh, Tara.
Yes.
Hey, Tara. Looking good, Tara.
Yeah, I know she recognizes the voice. She came over right away. Yes. Really funny. Yeah. Good girl. Yep. Okie dokie.
Lovely.
Well, tell Heidi hello. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. And do you have a place in Bend where you're gonna be able to put the letterpress, do you think?
Well, that's part of that. Tara, stop. That's part of the what Francis and Alex they bought their first house, and they're working on buying a second house, and they will leave it to me. And that's one of the conditions, is that they are going to make sure it has space for the letterpress and Tara or a dog. So they're looking. They have a lot of things on their plate.
Sure.
Frances is optimistic, thinking she can have that done before October, but I'm not sure yet. And it's not public knowledge yet. I haven't even talked with my employer. So
Sure. Of course.
There are a lot of things.
Of course.
Yes, to figure out. And I could work from there. That it could totally, I could do the same kind of work. I want to kind of see the timeline first. So there are different areas, but the houses go so quickly. They were.
Bend is crazy. Bend is insane.
Yeah.
It's like grown by like 30% in the last 20 years, right? Like it's.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. If that's even enough of an estimate, yes. So it'll be interesting, but I'm gradually learning more about it and meeting some more people. And I didn't know it, but Alex's stepmom is a poet and an artist, and they kind of held out. They didn't tell me that until I got to meet her last weekend, and she's a fabulous woman. And so it's another person, another connection. So I'm looking forward to it.
That's great. And Katrina is in Bend too, isn't she?
Yes, she is. And the person that I'm illustrating the book for, his sister is there. So,
okay.
Yeah, I'm really excited about that. I'm not sure. Have you met Kurt yet? Kurt Caswell? Yes, you met him in Portland because you were sitting on this side of me and he was sitting on that side.
That's right. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So many wild connections. And have you met? I don't know if you have to go, and I'm probably holding you up.
No, you have time.
Have you met Noah in person? I don't remember. Noah Davis.
Yes, I met him at AWP. Yeah. So I have a good friend who's a lovely poet and writer who lives in Vermont, Sean Prentice, who's really close with Noah and his dad.
Okay. Yeah.
Both. So I actually ended up spending I think I spent like a whole evening with those guys. So yeah.
Joseph Bednarik introduced me to Todd at AWP the first year that Sam and I started hanging around there. So that's how I got to know the two of them. But I just wanted to make sure that you'd mentioned him at some point. I can't remember where, but they're a couple of my favorite people and one of my favorite families.
Yeah, they're lovely. They're all great. Yeah.
Yes. Braden's still hanging out. He probably fell asleep.
That's my guess.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'll have to log them out here. Yes. Yes. Oh, now Tara's all stirred up. Yes.
Well, thank you guys so much. Robert, it's a pleasure to meet you and really exciting to see what you're doing. And if there's anything, as you're kayak shopping, if I can be a reference, I'd be happy to do that.
I'll remember that.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot where you live. That area is pretty incredible. There's a lot there to explore.
And are you going to submit something?
Yeah, definitely.
Good.
Definitely.
I sent you the link in an email too.
Perfect. I will submit something quite soon then. Yeah, that'd be great.
It's
Yeah.
already accepted. So.
Yeah.
Yes, I can tell you about it another time. Aaron wants me to go to Canada for a month, and I might try to do that in May. So
Oh,
I can
great.
get across the border and get back if they'll let me back in. So keep hearts, but yeah.
Oh, that would be great.
Yes.
Yeah, that would be great.
I'm going to sign off now. It was good meeting
Awesome.
you again.
Yeah, thank you so much, Robert. Really appreciate it. Really grateful.
And Juniper, I'll just keep messaging you and emailing you, okay?
Yes. Yeah. And I will eventually answer all of them.
Okay.
Yes.
Thanks a lot, guys. Good night.
Yeah. Good night.
See ya. Thanks a lot, Robert.